Hi, excuse me, hi, this is Joe again with another review. And of course, to conclude my little run here, talking about the 2015 Major League Baseball playoffs, and I figured since this is the day before the 2015 World Series will start, I figured, okay, do a review of, the 2015 World Series. Who knows what I have, of course, the Mets versus the New York Mets versus the defending American League champion Kansas City Royals. And of course, will be then the first team since the Texas Rangers to make the World Series in back-to-back years. Unfortunately, they lost both times. I think one time to the Cardinals and one time to the Giants. So of course, and also again for the second year in a row, the Royals will have home field advantage in the World Series because of the stupid bit in the All-Star game. And they actually lost the All-Star game, so of course they were not going to have home field advantage. But for the most part, I think this is going to be a very interesting and hopefully a good World Series because there's a matchup that has never happened in the World Series before. Because the Mets, well, when the Mets have played Kansas City before, in exhibition games and in interleague, but they never play against each other in the World Series when the stage is bigger. And of course, you also have the 1985 World Champions, Kansas City, who's haven't won a World Series since then, versus the 1986 Mets, or the 1986 World Champions, which happen to be the Mets, playing against each other in the World Series, which is of course very unique because you have a team that hasn't won a World Series in 30 years versus a team that hasn't won in 29 years. So of course, one of the long streaks is going to end. It's obviously going to end this year. Of course, I think that most people are, well, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think most people are all predicting that the Royals are going to beat the Mets out because, like I said earlier, they are the defending American League champs. They haven't won for 30 years, and that they have home field advantage. And so, well, the only way the Mets could have the advantage in this series is, of course, the starting pitching staff, who has been pretty dominant throughout the playoffs. I mean, the only weakness in the Mets pitching staff is the bullpen, particularly get to the closer, Familia. But of course, Kansas City has a very good bullpen of their own. So the only thing that could possibly hurt Kansas City in this series is that the starting pitching is not as good as the Mets starting pitching. And that's to me, I think that's the only weakness that Kansas City has, for the most part. Is that the pitching staff is not that good as is not as dominant as the Mets pitching staff is. Throughout the whole postseason, the Mets pitching staff has been pretty dominant. I mean, they dominated the Dodgers and obviously the Cubs because the Mets swept them in 4 games. Of course, one stat that they're throwing in everybody's face is that every time when there was a team that won four straight in the LCS, I'm talking about since in the last 30 years since the LCS has gone to the 4 out of 7 format instead of the original 3 out of 5, which it was. No team has ever won the World Series by sweeping, and I'm talking about the last 20 years or so. The teams kept losing. Excuse me. What a lot of people forget was that in 1969, the New York Mets swept the very first National League LCS. I think the Orioles did the same in 1969, and the Mets beat them out in the World Series. So you could take that stat and throw it out the window. Because also in 1989, the Oakland um, beat uh, beat Toronto. I think it was in 5 games. So it was a pretty dominant in 1989, and they won the Earthquake series. So you can take that stat and just throw that out the window. You can play Oakland hasn't won. And I think they swept Boston twice, 2 out of 3 times in the playoffs in late '80s, early '90s, and they lost twice in the World Series. You could always, and you also take the Braves. They won a few sweeps and they never got to the World Series. In the late '90s, early 2000s, they kept losing all the time. It's just a bunch of crap. But I feel that the Mets are going to win this. I feel the Mets are going to have a pretty good chance to win this World Series. I predict the Mets are going to win in 6 games. Um, I'm not predicting a sweep like I did against the Cubs. I'm not going to go that far because I have to kind of respect the Royals and have to pick them to win a couple of games. But I'd be very surprised if the Mets do either the Mets win in the sweep or the Royals win in the sweep. I'd be very surprised if it ends in a 4-game sweep. Uh, in either way, because I don't see a sweep happening in this year's World Series. I don't see it happening. I do happen to predict it's going to be a 6-game series, and I predict that the Mets will win. Because I'm predicting the Royals will win 2 games. I expect them to win at least one game at home out of the first two games. But they're all facing Harvey in game one, and it's Harvey's main stage, and of course like I mentioned in an earlier video. Hey, Scott Boras, Matt's arm did not fall off. He must have pitched about close to 200 innings, and his arm didn't fall off yet. But getting back to the World Series, I expect hopefully the Mets will win. It's been almost I was like 15 years old the last time the Mets won a World Series, and I'm 44 now. So I'm waiting a long time to see the Mets win the World Series, and this is also the 4th time in my lifetime that the Mets have been in the World Series. I was 2 years old in '73. I obviously was not born yet in '69, so I missed the whole thing with the Mets. The Miracle Mets in '69, so I wasn't even born yet. I was 2 years old in '73, so I never really saw the Mets being a winning team until, of course, in the '80s when the Mets were winning all the time. And they finally won the World Series in '86. And then, of course, in 2000, they lost to that crappy other team in town, the Yankees. And then, of course, they have been in the World Series since then. And thanks to Carlos blanking Beltran, the Mets didn't get into the World Series in 2006 to play Detroit. And one interesting thing that none of these so-called baseball experts are mentioning, and I'm going to mention this right now. The Mets have been in the World Series now. This is their 5th trip to the World Series. All 5 times were against a different opponent. You say, oh, that's just a minor thing or whatever. That's just nitpicking over it. But it's true. The Mets have been in the World Series 5 times and they played 5 different teams. Or going to play the 5th different team in this year's World Series. Because the first year there was of course, I think 3 out of the 5 teams was from the Eastern Division. They played the Orioles, they played the Red Sox, and they played the Yankees. And they played 2 teams that were originally in the American League West before they added the Central Division. And of course, Kansas City, Oakland in '73, and of course now Kansas City. And I do hope, excuse me, if the Mets do win, if Kansas City happens to knock off the Mets, which I don't see happening. There's a very good possibility that Kansas City might beat the Mets. But I try to be positive for not only for myself as a Met fan, but other Met fans. Because naturally I don't want to put any dappers on anything, or to put any hexes on anything. And I do expect the Mets to win. But in case of the possibility that Kansas City beats the Mets and wins the first World Series in 30 years, that will tie the Mets, the Blue Jays, and the Marlins for winning 2 championships as an expansion team. And if the Mets do win, which God willing, I hope they do. that they will be the greatest expansion team of all time because they were won 3 times. That's what I was kind of hoping. Even though my prediction was wrong, I predicted the Mets and Toronto to be in the World Series. I think it would have been more fun if Toronto was in the World Series and not the Mets. I mean, not the Mets. I mean, not Kansas City. If it was a Kansas City, if it was a Toronto Mets World Series, I think it would have been a lot more fun. Because I would like to see a Canadian team in the World Series again, uh, which of course the Blue Jays are. And of course, they won two. Like I said just a minute ago, the Blue Jays and the Mets both won 2 championships as an expansion team. And so I wanted to win. It would be the battle to see who will be the greatest expansion team of all time. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen with Kansas City. Kansas City did win once, but unfortunately, like I said earlier, until last year, until 2014, they haven't been in the playoffs since the 1985 team. And of course, the 1985 team, I mean, other than George Brett Saberhagen, and Dan Quisenberry, that Royals team in '85 wasn't. You didn't have a whole lot of Hall of Famers or guys on that team. But I do enjoy the '85 team because they destroyed the Cardinals and they beat them 3 games in a row after being down 3 games to 1, and they became the first team ever to lose the first 2 games at home and end up winning the World Series. Hopefully, it doesn't happen to the Mets because they have to play the first 2 games in Kansas City. But I do think that this series hopefully will be a good World Series, and I expect it to go at least 6 games. And hopefully the Mets will come on top. And since I have and that's my overall prediction for the 2015 World Series. And one more thing, for those of you who are watching this video on YouTube, I do have a Facebook page for Met fans, for myself and other Met fans, called Real New York Mets Fans page on Facebook. Suggest you check it out, and and you know, post of you. That you have to be polite to your fellow Met fans if they have a different opinion. I know I do, because I'm more of a realistic Met fan at my age now than I was when I was younger. Because when I was younger, I used to be crazy all gung ho, as you can see all the Met stuff behind me. Because the 1986 team, that was my team. Even though this is, like I said, this is the second Mets team to go to the World Series since the last one in 1986. But no Met team, in my opinion, will be as good as long as the Real Punch own this team. There's never going to be a Met team that's going to be as good as that one. The pitching staff is, I think the pitching staff is better, maybe slightly better than the '86 team. If I have to pick who has the better pitching staff, the 2015 Mets has the better pitching staff. But the '86 Mets had the better bullpen. They had more power in the lineup than the 2015 team does. Excuse me. As you can tell by my voice, I'm still getting over my rooting for the Mets last week. With the Cubs. And also, if there's any Cub fans having been watching this video, you can take all your copies of Back to the Future Part 2 and shove it up your ass. Because that's what you get for believing in a stupid movie. Back to the Future was a bad movie, was a stupid movie. First one was good, third one was also good, second one sucked. And that's what you get when you believe in that movie. As an omen for the Cubs to win this year. And I hope that all those people who bet money on the Cubs to win the World Series this year in Vegas feel like a bunch of stupid morons, which they are, for betting on a team because of the movie. But I do think that Major League Baseball is surprised that the Mets are in the World Series. And I feel that a lot of people are expecting either the Cubs or the Nationals, for the National League, to be in the World Series. Matter of fact, a lot of people predict the Nationals to win the World Series this year. Of course, we all know now that's not going to happen. And the funny thing is that at the time of doing this video, when the Mets beat the Dodgers, when they beat up the Nationals for the Eastern Division, the Nationals fired Matt Williams, who was the manager, and got rid of the entire coaching staff. After the Mets beat the Dodgers in the first round of the playoffs, the Dodgers fired Mattingly, the Dodgers manager. Now that the Mets beat the Cubs, so far they haven't fired Mattingly yet. And I wonder what would happen to Ned Yost if the Mets beat the Kansas City in the World Series. No, excuse me, not if, but when. When they beat the Royals in the World Series. Well, like I said, that's my. I wonder if they're going to fire him. Like, Matt Williams got fired and Mattingly got fired. But I think it would be fun if that happens. Or funny if that happens. Because, look, every time any team loses to the Mets, they end up getting fired. So they kiss of death almost this year. Because, like I said earlier, nobody's predicting the Mets to be this well, or play this well. And I think that originally, at the start of the year, the Mets were predicted to be like a 500 team. Maybe be in second, or maybe have an outside shot of a wild card spot. And not to beat the Nationals out. I think one thing that a lot of people predicted was the Mets would be a disaster because the Mets lost all 13 games played between the Cubs and the Pirates. The Mets lost all of them. And the Mets beat the Cubs. Well, the Pirates got knocked off by the Cubs in the one-game playoff, and the Mets swept them in the LCS. So you can take all the stuff that happened to the Mets in the regular season and just throw them out the window. Matter of fact, I don't even remember the last time the Mets played Kansas City in Interleague. I think it might be like last year, 2 years ago, the Mets played in Kansas City. I forgot how it turned out. Because it has been a while since the Mets played Kansas City. But I think the series with Kansas City is going to be fun. It's going to be, like I said earlier, a good World Series. And I predict the Mets will win in 6. And I don't predict the Mets will win in 7. Of course, we know last year the Kansas City became the first team in 35, and what was last year was like 35 first home team in 35 years to lose a 7th game of the World Series at home. So, there's a possibility that may be happening again this year. With the Mets. But, I do hope the Mets do win. I like to see them win. That's just stick it to all the dumb Yankee fans and the Curtis Lewa, the founder of the Guardian Angels, is a dumb Yankee fan. And I can say lose. I'm surrounded by Yankee fans in my co-op, even though I live in Queens, New York. I actually live 20 minutes away from Citi Field. I'm surrounded by stupid Yankee fans. I like to see them get the comeuppance this year. That's my review. I know it went a little bit longer than I was hoping. That's my prediction for the 2015, or my preview of the 2015 World Series. Please click on the video, please rate it, feel free to comment on, please subscribe to my channel, please forward this video onto your Facebook pages. Also, you can check out all my videos on my YouTube channel, but also on rowdyc.com. That's ROWDY, C.com. That's the homepage. That's the home website of the Rowdy Reviewer, Chris Lee Moore. Check them out. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.